Hello everyone, welcome to Field Notes, an exploration of functional medicine. I'm Rob Downey, a family practice MD and Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm coming to you from Seaworthy Functional Medicine in Homer, Alaska. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. Today we are fortunate enough to be joined by Mike Collins. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. I got up in time to have a little coffee and shovel my driveway and
Don't have that problem. I grew up with that, so I know. I was the shoveler.
Where's your hometown?
Central New York, Syracuse.
Mm.
And I went to school 15 minutes from the Canadian border, so I know snow. So.
Oh yeah. There's kind of, as you remember then, there's sort of a rhythm to it of having enough time and can either enjoy it or
Right.
rail at it.
If you're going to go anywhere, you got to leave a little time.
Sure. Exactly. So today, thankfully, I got the equation right and arrived here with, in a peaceful state of mind and got a little blood moving.
There you go.
Well, let me introduce you to our audience and also thank our audience for joining us today. So, Mike, you're an expert in sugar addiction, and that's the area of your passion in terms of helping people understand that and break free of it. And there are, like a lot of the thought leaders that I get to talk to, you have a book, you have a course that people can participate in. So there's these multifaceted ways that people can learn what you have to teach. And if they care about and want to learn about how sugar is hacking their system or messing with them, hooking them,
Yep.
then you can help them liberate themselves. Is that accurate?
We can indeed. And I've done it thousands of times.
Wonderful. Well, it's perfect marriage for a functional medicine discussion because sugar's such a troublemaker.
I like that. I'm going to use that. I'm stealing that one. That's a good one. Hit troublemaker. It is indeed.
Yeah. T.S. Eliot said a good poet's a good thief. So I think we're always
Right.
taking these ideas and getting the word out, right?
Yep.
As part of a community of folks that are thinking about these things.
Yep.
So let's start with there's so much I think that'll be important to talk about today, but the obvious is, why is sugar a problem for people? And as you explicate that for our audience today, has it been off-putting to people or stigmatizing for them to think of this as an addiction? Is that a hurdle for some people because we live in a society that has a stigma about even the word?
Wow. I mean, right out of the gate, the thought problem of my life, the bane of my existence, is the word addiction. Even Google and Facebook don't like it. They don't allow you to advertise with that word. It's crazy. But the stigma is real. I came up as a recovering person in the substance use disorder world, and became very active in a group called the New Recovery Advocacy Movement, which essentially is trying to reduce stigma and change the language around addiction, addict, junkie, whatever, all that kind of stuff, to substance use disorder. And in sugar, I think it emanates from just a cultural evolution of 300 years since the English Empire grew its empire on slavery and sugar. And that there's no one alive who believes, you and functional medicine folks in general, people from the addiction world, they are outliers. It's new. It's people think that it's a guy with a brown paper bag under a bridge when they hear the word addiction. And I always try to use the analogy of nicotine as opposed to drugs and alcohol. Yes, a lot of my protocol, a lot of the work that I've done and do still comes from late stage food addiction and the drug addiction world, the recovery, harm reduction, those kind of bridge things like medically assisted treatment, which is Suboxone and methadone. You know, we try and walk people down a little bit. So there are a lot of analogies, but still, it's still stigmatized in a big way because morally, ethically, legally, you can give this product to a 1-year-old and nobody cares. I mean, yet, and this is a tectonic shift that is happening, is going to be, who knows when the tipping point will be. You know, the tipping point for the tobacco was the tobacco litigation efforts. $1 trillion advertising campaign simply because for 3 or 4 years it was the only, it was on the news every day. And so this is, what we struggle against, probably one of the biggest things we struggle against in this, now that science has said, this is harmful. This is harmful. The Pediatrics Dental Association, a lot of the have said no sugar sweetened beverages for children under 5. And reduce the sugar way down now. That's just came out. It was the only real change in the food pyramid was that, to reduce the sugar for kids. So it's happening, but as a general public kind of thing, it's not very well known. And the main thing I'll finish up with is that it's not an actual malady. In other words, it's not in the DSM-5, probably won't be in the DSM-6, while the Food Addiction Institute that I'm, was the past chairman of, is working on getting it in there so that people can go to treatment and they can get treatment for this. I mean, they actually have caffeinism in there, caffeine use disorder. It just doesn't make sense that sugar wouldn't be right behind it.
Sort of the elephant in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, the logical next question, I think, is why it's addictive. And as I ask that, I should mention that I've never forgotten Mark Hyman, the current chair of the Cleveland Clinic for the Center for Functional Medicine, saying that if there's a study, if you put laboratory rodents in a cage and you give them one bottle with cocaine and one with sugar, they'll take the sugar. And I haven't hunted down the study, but I'm sure that's the tip of the iceberg around a huge body of data then around how it hacks our system. It seemed to me the prevalent thread in my functional medicine training is that ancestral people, hunter-gatherers, if they found a honeycomb or a whole bunch of ripe berries in a field in the autumn, they're going to have a primal imperative to load up. So one tenet here seems to be that this is a genetic physiologic compulsion we have that makes a lot of sense in a feast-famine world, but most of us in Western society don't have famine anymore.
Well, you're hitting the nail right on the head there. And there's a great video on YouTube called Is Sugar Good For You by Dr. Gary Fettke, Fettke, and describes this exact phenomenon. It's like 300 years ago, the body got a very little amount of this product in, and we evolved for 100 million years to get very little, once a year, possibly, if you want to risk getting stung by a bee or a lot of bees, then maybe a little bit more, but that was still once a year. And then it, for 300 years, we've hybridized fruit, we've, obviously processed sugar. And, I'm sure your audience knows, but half of the glucose, half the table sugar molecule is glucose and half is fructose. And you're headed towards an interesting division in why people can't stop, right? And that we know what the glucose does to the body. We know that it, gives you diabetes too, weight gain, all these kinds of things. But what has really exploded in the last 5 years is the understanding of what the fructose does. And you can see in the fructose numbers, the high fructose corn syrup, when it came into the diet, runs parallel to the obesity crisis from the 80s to now. And so, Dr. Lustig, who's probably the de facto leader of this movement to reduce sugar and to make people aware, his fructose video is now 11 million views, like a college lecture on fructose. And I asked Dr. Lustig on our summits, and Dr. Fettke as well, is fructose a psychoactive drug? Both of them said yes, very quickly. And this idea that the science has exploded in the last 5 years, that fructose affects the nucleus accumbens, the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, all of these brain reward systems. And in scientific terms, abuse and constant use lowers your dopamine receptors, down regulates them, it's called, thins them out. They have less of them. And so people, when they finally, the way people get well is when they finally split apart the idea that they're not looking for something sweet. Yes, like you said, we are attracted to sweet things. There's nothing in nature that's poisonous that has fructose in it. So we are attracted, as you called it, an evolutionary imperative. But they don't realize that we're pounding 20, the average person 20 teaspoons a day, and a Coke is 12. So anybody that's got a big habit is 30 or 40 teaspoons a day. We were just not meant to hijack our dopamine receptors that way. And what we've done, and this is the important part about getting well, is we have grooved neural pathways in our brain that have literally taken over our emotional management systems. In other words, as a child, we were given cookies to calm us down, to stop us from crying, to make us feel better. And we carried that emotional management system into adulthood, right? And it's not a system that serves a person well anymore, simply because of the abuse potential of it and the addictive potential of it. And people don't want to accept the idea that this is a powerful psychoactive drug. But if you talk to anyone who's lost 100 or 200 pounds, they go through the same exact recovery process that a drug or alcohol user or abuser does. It's a very common well-known tenet of the drug and alcohol world, that if you started using drugs and alcohol at 14 or 15, you stopped growing emotionally. Your life reflects it, your relationships, your finances, your career. You don't come in on a winning streak if you're a recovering person, right? And so the same thing, like I said, if you talk with someone who's fallen to a right-sized body, who's recovered from sugar and flour and addiction, they go through that process. It has nothing to do with what they eat. Yes, they have to eat whole food, but it has nothing to do with exercise, calorie restriction. It has to do with eliminating this psychoactive drug from their body. And that, I love podcasts because I don't have a meat is murder tagline. I don't have a friends don't let friends drive drunk, like a instantly recognizable, understood tagline that encompasses the whole explanation of why I'm so passionate about this and why people are not willing to accept it, kind of thing. So it takes a little bit of time to set it up. And what I just described is really the core of it, that emotional management hijacking from, literally probably the womb on.
I love getting to hear that. And I love it that our listeners are getting to hear that, because it's, I think, one of those key puzzle pieces for people who intuit that they're off track and that sugar's part of the problem. And so many of the people I've taken care of in my 16 years of functional medicine, I've witnessed that transformation as they embrace whole foods and the sugar goes by the wayside. It's transformative, which fits my understanding of the recovery process. It's through, not around. And then some related puzzle pieces are that the incredible immunoinflammatory storm, which is driven by sugar molecules getting clipped to other molecules in the body and then recognized by the immune system as alien. And then there's low-grade autoimmunity. Holes are getting punched in the blood-brain barrier. So now the brain's inflamed, which is increasing the desire for the sugar, for the dopamine hit, which is a diminishing rewards. You can see how people feel really stuck.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're nailing it right on the head. It's like the science of it all is exploding, the understanding of why, but the cultural, social part is the puzzle piece that the awareness piece is just not out there. The acceptance piece, if you will.
Well, I'm sure our audience is itching to know 3 things. How does somebody know they're hooked? I saw on your website there's a quiz. How do they quit? And I presume they quit by embracing something new and better. They don't just leave a gaping hole in their psyche, right?
Yeah, exactly. I always say if you made it to sugaraddiction.com, you don't have to take the quiz. It's like intuitively people know whether or not they have this addiction. You know what I mean? They've struggled with it. And usually the weight loss world, like every diet that's worth the paper it's printed on, says if you want to lose weight, you have to get off the white stuff, right? And so, I mean, it's scientific lore that there's hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that say if someone loses a large amount of weight in a short period of time, 95+% of them gain it all back and then some in the first year. And the way that they do it, the reason that they do that is they don't handle this emotional piece. They restricted calories, they white knuckled it, they exercised it out, and they got a few pounds down. But they didn't make it a lifestyle because they didn't go to the root. They didn't go further down and get off the sugar and stay off the sugar. So yes, identifying it, number one, like you said, is the first thing. And it's like any problem in life, or certainly any addiction, is just standing up and saying, I could biochemically have an issue with this product. Maybe I can't ingest it. And so I always ask them to do what I call a scratch test, right? Like if you were to go to an allergist, they'd scratch you for ragweed or pollen or dust or whatever. I say, look, here's your scratch test. You're an adult. We call this adulting here. 30, 60, or 90 days, preferably 90. No flour, no sugar. And I'm not about caffeine. We can talk about that. No flour, sugar, and caffeine, because I think they're all wired together. And just see if you don't lose some weight. See if your skin doesn't clear up. See if the brain fog doesn't clear up. See if the doc says maybe you can get off your diabetes 2 meds. That happens all the time. And they're your psychotropics as well. And so just see. I mean, usually by 90 days, we've screwed up their sugar using. They may not, they never want to, like, there's so many positives that have come. Now they may slip later on down the line, but they always come back because they've just had such positive results. And if I told you not to eat steak for 90 days, you'd think, I like steak, but you do it. And broccoli, the same thing. But this should be a clue that you have these emotions around it. You have these, I can't do it, it's hard kind of thing. I mean, you have cravings. The part that in doing over 1,000 of these one-on-one with people is like there's patterns that develop. And again, back to the nicotine addiction thing as opposed to the heroin or alcohol. You're not going to die from it, but it's going to be annoying as hell for maybe 10 or 15 days where you've got a constellation of symptoms that are hunger, unbelievable starving, because you're literally sharing the delivery system, right? I mean, you take a little alcohol, you take a little heroin, a little cocaine, but we're pounding this through our delivery system, the 20 teaspoons average, and that doesn't include the flour, which turns to sugar right in your stomach. So you've got to separate the two out, and that, your body's going to set up the cravings, headaches, lethargy, literal physical depression. You've pounded your dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA for decades. And now you're going to rest it because you're not manipulating it manually with a substance. Okay. And so it's just like, if I can get you through that, if I can get you to the other side of that, then you can use your own body as an N1 experiment. Then you can add back something, right? You can add whatever you want to add back, maybe a little caffeine or a little whatever. But you can test one thing at a time on a healed up body, a changed body, genuinely changed body. And the difficult part is always the emotions. It's always this training that we have to reach for a product to solve stress, worry, anxiety, fear. Heck, when was the last time you saw a movie where a woman broke up with her boyfriend, didn't have an ice cream party? I mean, it's like a cultural norm. And so when they get past that, when they separate this out in their mind and in their body, then they get on to making this a lifestyle. And, people always ask, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? I don't know. I mean, it depends is the answer, because I'll tell you right now, 1/3 of people are biochemically unable to ingest this product without setting up terrible cravings. And so freedom means 100% abstinence. Then there's a second group who we call harmful users. They could possibly go back to occasional use once they get stable again. And then there's a group of people that are like alcohol, and they can have a little bit and it doesn't even affect them. They'll just leave half a brownie, and we all hate those people. No, just kidding. They can, but it doesn't. Although the obesity record, or the obesity statistics track with the high fructose corn syrup, you can be very thin and have a very bad sugar addiction. I've had Olympic athletes, ultra marathoners, people that couldn't get off the sugar to save their life, could do anything with their body, didn't appear to be an addict, but the other symptoms, the brain fog, the acne, the whatever other different symptoms were bothering them too. So yeah, getting through it, getting out of it. It's not, you're not going to have the DTs, or you're not going to have a seizure. I mean, maybe some people get pretty sick though, and so it's a real thing. That's what I guess I want to stress. It's real.
Right.
Sugar addiction withdrawals are real.
Right, and I should parallel your comments from what I've witnessed in my functional medicine practice, that there's a rugged period there. It seems to me there's different dimensions to the 2 to 3 week period off sugar. Is maybe a sprint, and then
right. That's a good way to put it.
The other challenges that arise are more akin to a marathon, in that
true,
that it's different to be 6 months or a year into feeling so much better without it, and those junctures around social occasions, or somebody's feeling down emotionally and their craving will kick in. One thing that I was fortunate enough to have 2 functional medicine certified health coaches as part of this team for a couple of years, and the observations we made as a team triad were some of the biggest and best lessons I've learned in the last few years. And one of the things that was so powerful is this idea of food friendships.
Okay.
And so when I think about the sugar, my training as a physician in addiction was that the psyche, or the body, hates a hole. If there's a hole where something used to be and something else is in its place, people do better. And I've noticed when people have these friendships with whole food, and they think about, well, I'm hanging out more with my new friends who I like and respect more, and less with my old friends that didn't really have my back.
I like it.
Then there's this sense of affinity to this new team, and it avoids then so many of these shoulds, or monastic living, or dieting. There's so many traps in American consciousness. So in particular, I wonder about talking about that first group, that group that doesn't do well to go back. I'd like you to educate all of us a little bit today about that. And I should be transparent here. I think I'm in that first group that doesn't do well going back to sugar. And my suspicion is that a lot of us that don't do well with it have what I've termed sort of body memory. Like the immune and inflammatory wreckage is lying around in the brain and the nervous system and the tissues. And I think when that load hits the system, there's a sort of like set of alarms that go off. So for me, sugar was a lot of the depletion that went with my medical training and staying up all night delivering babies and being in the ER and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And there was an irritability that that was part of that phase that I was not proud of, but that was just part of
That's
the
a symptom,
challenge.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I've noticed that the dose of sugar coming back into my system that'll trigger that irritability is like 1/1000th of my old load.
Right,
But the
right.
symptomatology is pretty darn similar to me being crabby at 3 in the morning when I'd been delivering babies for 3 days. So
Yeah.
can you unpack that for us a little?
Yeah, again, I mean, people sometimes recoil at my drug analogies, but what you're talking about is a couple things. In withdrawal, just pause, post-acute withdrawal syndrome. And the other is something that is really not mentioned much even now in the literature as much as it should be in drug and alcohol recovery, which is the idea of a progressive illness, right? Meaning if I stopped drinking for X amount of years, 10 years, I would pick up in the exact same place that I left off. Like I never stopped. Like my tolerance would be lower. It really wouldn't be, I mean, I could drink half a drink and be blottoed. And, back then I could have drank a case of beer. Same thing with sugar, I've found. Exactly what you're describing. If someone goes a long period of time, me personally, just so over 30 years of not having sugar, I've had 10 or 15 what I call accidental ingestations. Someone swore to God that they didn't have sugar in the salad dressing. They made it personally, right? But they didn't realize that agave syrup is, straight, almost 75% straight fructose and going right to my brain, right? And so I'm eating this beautiful salad and I get this, all of a sudden, all of the lights are brighter. I'm much more intelligent and charming and all this kind of stuff. And I'm lit up like a Christmas tree, right? And I realized, I said, excuse me, did you put sugar in this? And she says, no, only agave. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And so I have, and the ride goes like this. That night, or about 20 minutes later, I'm starving to death. It's like, I can't have enough food, and I can't eat sugar again, or so I have to go back to whole food. And I'm really not starving. It's my body craving this stuff, right? And then I'll start crashing about an hour or two later. It's actually faster than that, but in an hour or two, I am just wiped out, right? Got to go to sleep. That night I will sweat. Okay. And the next morning I'll be depressed. Next day, for half a day or a whole day, if I don't go exercise or do something, I'll be depressed. And this is just a very minute amount of sugar. And this is what happens to people. I call it healing up, basically. And this is why heavy amounts of fruit can bring it back. It's basically heavy amounts of fructose. And we have these borderline fruits, where fruit and dried fruit and juice and other, things fall in. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. The folks, they don't, again, it goes back, I use Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney used to say, I don't get no respect, right? It's like sugar gets no respect as a psychoactive drug of abuse. And again, you only have to ask someone who's lost 100 to 200 pounds and gone through this recovery to understand that it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's the dose that makes the poison. And this is the largest dose of a powdered substance that any human ingests, bar none. So yeah, I mean, it's the progressive illness, the post-acute withdrawal syndromes, which can last up to a year while your body is reordering itself. Just look at Daniel Amen's brain scans, where someone, comes in with the diet of the standard American diet. They got literal holes in their brain. I mean, the scan is very clear that there's holes in their brain. And then they change their diet, they eat whole food, they go a couple of years, they come back and the holes are gone. So it's I think the progressive illness thing needs to get out more, but it's too in depth for only the people who have gone, at least 120 days and are really committed before I start bringing that out.
Yeah.
In the early days, they're like, the bane of my existence is the inability to compute what is a social change, what is a social norm. And this is a tectonic shift. Like seatbelts in cars, drinking and driving, condoms in bathrooms. I mean, it is, science now says this, but culture's so way far behind, it's not even funny. So, yeah.
Yeah. What does the person do then who's having success? They're 4 months in, they're a year in, and they're at that birthday party, that Thanksgiving gathering. Your community must address this all the time. How do you arm people with tools for those
Yeah.
situations?
Yeah, the founder of the Food Addiction Institute, he's in his 80s, still alive, and he's like, he came up with this, and it's true, and it's, this thing needs an inordinate amount of support. Because we are outliers, because we are early adopters, they call it in tech, um, you have to find a tribe of people, because likely even your own family is not going to be supportive. They believe the modern myths of moderation, of, you can have just a little, you can regulate it by exercise. I mean, I have gym owners, like I said, Olympic athletes, people, they can do anything with their body, but they could not regulate. They could not moderate. They had to be cold turkey. And so they could never, like, they don't immediately develop familial or friend relationships who get them, who understand them, who understand what's going on through lived experience of abstinence, essentially. And so they have to have a new tribe, and they have to be able to go in the bathroom at the family gathering and text them. And, they have to be able to be plugged in way before they get in that situation. Because if they get in that situation and they don't have I guess in psychology or sociology, they call it loose. If they have loose bonds with the relationship, they're not going to want to call them on Christmas when they're at their uncle's house, But if they have tight bonds with the folks, they're going to go in that bathroom. They're going to get on the phone and says, I can't take what my family, they're all dying of diabetes and they're still eating this crap. They've got to be able to have someone, a group, a tribe that they can plug into. And that is the answer to it.
That's so interesting. If the coach I work with most were part of this conversation, she would say failing to plan is planning to fail.
That's exactly, we use that line. That was adopted from, I think, from 12-step food recovery groups. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm sure parents hearing this, they're thinking, oh my gosh, how do I help? Could be challenging enough to help myself. How do I help my kids? And I know you're passionate about that, right? Because that was a big deal for your kids.
I get it all the time. Yeah. It's the same as the airlines. You got to put your own oxygen mask on first. You're not going to accomplish this with do as I say and not as I do. My mother had a stash her whole life, and I knew exactly where it was. It was like she's not getting away with anything, kind of thing. And you're not gonna. Your parents, your kids are gonna know literally your behavior changes. That's the scary part. They're gonna know that you went out to the car or you came home from 7-Eleven with a little bit of a different attitude than you left. They're gonna get it. They can. I can smell chocolate on my mother. I mean, you can smell it. You can. You get this. If you're abstinent, you get this olfactory awareness that's crazy. And so, yeah, you've got to go first, and you've got to be committed to this, or you're not going to get your kids. There's I like to separate the kids into two separate things. There's a great guy who was on one of our summits, Dr. Michael Gorin, the Gorin Lab at USC. Sorry, he gets mad when I say that. USC. It's like he wrote a book called Sugar Proof, and it's at sugarproofkids.com. It's like how to get your kids off sugar, But I find his work is good, but it doesn't follow the addiction model. And that's different. It's for different folks, but it's the kids who have never had sugar. And then the kids who've had sugar older than 5, who trying to get them off. That's a bigger challenge. Younger than 5, they'll adapt almost immediately, younger than 4 for sure. They'll adapt, you just give them a little fruit for a few days and then you never have to give them candy again. But after that, it gets more difficult. So yeah, you've got to go first. You've got to be committed to this. You've got to be sugar free, or and that's how you help get your kids off it.
Well, good news for serious parents is it's like the rest of parenting. There's a
Yeah.
terrific amount of integrity and forthrightness and sort of deep foundational follow through that our
Mm.
kids are keying off of.
Yeah, for sure.
And they know what's going on with us, and they know whether we're being honest with them about whether we walk our talk.
Oh yeah, they know. Believe me, they're smart as hell. They know. Believe me, they know. And you're not fooling the kids. I mean, you may think you're fooling yourself. A lot of people think they're fooling themselves. Or, I mean, I've seen it. Not that I've seen like I've seen it in public too, but people who say I don't eat sugar or whatever, they're like, oh, I don't eat much sugar, right? And then when they get honest and they get in the program, then they tell the whole real story.
Yeah.
I've been sneaking this stuff since I'm 5 years old, right? I've been like hiding it, like stealing it, stealing my kids'
Mhm.
Halloween candy. When they get honest because they really want it for themselves, then you know the whole story. So I know both sides of the story. And the
Mhm.
parents aren't getting away with nothing, believe me. It ain't working. So don't delude yourself.
Well, Mike, share with us if you would, if somebody joins your program, what can they expect? If they hear this podcast and they think, okay, I'm in, how's it gonna feel as they start to do the program? The initial steps are straightforward because your website will be posted in the show notes. There's
Yeah.
places they click and they sort of start the process. So what's that journey gonna feel like for them?
Well, I just, I give away, I used to have I have an book on Amazon. You can get a paperback there if you want. But we give it away free now on the website. And so it's a big yellow book. You can see it right at sugaraddiction.com. And then we have the 30-day challenge. And the challenge is me coming in to their inbox of the video every day, can kind of walk them through the patterns that have developed. It's best to know what's coming, because when people turn back is because something's happening to them physically, emotionally, spiritually, that something's happening to them, a reordering, a change, a withdrawal, whatever you want to call it. And they think it's something else. They
Mhm.
literally run off and get an SSRI, or they go to the doctor because they're ill, or they get another pill for
Mhm.
something. But in
Mhm.
reality, it's just sugar withdrawals. And
Mhm.
this happens a lot. So I walk you through that, and there's all kinds of benefits and bonuses in there from my high ticket coaching stuff. So there's lots of information in there, but more importantly, that it's a ticket to the tribe. It's a ticket to the Zoom meetings every night of the weeknight, the forum with 7,000 people in it that have, between one day and 5 years, that they just come back because they get a kick out of helping people walk through. I'm not paying them or anything. They're all just participating in this kind of what we, also borrowed from the drug and alcohol world, was peer recovery structure, and one
Mhm.
person's helping another, right? And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it works because, I mean, there's now a lot of studies that talk about the online communities being as valuable as in person for this type of, from cancer to diabetes to everything. These type of peer-to-peer structures work. And our job is to build that vessel, to build that community, so that when people plug into it, they can get well. So it's taken a lot of years, but it's getting there. We're little mini evangelists running around. It's like, and like we have coaches and stuff that can help if that's something you want to upgrade to or whatever. Some people
Yeah.
need that one-on-one accountability.
Yeah. People can up their game as much as they need to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
successful.
I mean, some people just read the book and that's all they need. I mean,
Mhm.
they do usually plug into the community. Do I find that if they're not plugged into the community, that part, it's hard to do this in isolation. It really is. I mean, we're, as I said before, outliers and early adopters, and everybody else thinks we're a little nuts. Like
Uh,
they think you're depriving your children of a childhood. I used to get that all the time, and people still get that, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
One of the most effective descriptions of functional medicine I ever got to hear was when I took the Applying Functional Medicine in Clinical Practice class, which is the introductory 5-day course
Mm,
in Fort Lauderdale in 2006. And so
Wow.
David Jones at that time was the chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine, family practice doc from Oregon.
Okay.
And he said that there's a study where a neurological study where people wear glasses that flip everything upside down. So the
Okay.
optics of the glasses invert
Yeah.
the world.
Right.
And I don't know how they set up the study so that these people didn't get injured. Maybe this was in like a padded facility with nothing to trip on. I never thought about that. But
That was before virtual reality. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, maybe there were more lax standards when the study was done and some of them did fall. But then and this was a real study, this wasn't hypothetical or conjectural. So when the glasses are taken off, the most fascinating thing is then that the world flips upside down. So the brain has corrected, during wearing the glasses, the brain will flip this.
Okay.
And then after the glasses come off, the brain will flip another 180. And then finally, everything reorients to vertical. And David Jones' analogy was that all of us sitting in that room didn't know it, but we'd been wearing upside down glasses about health and medicine.
I like this.
And
This
he
is
said,
great.
okay, we're taking the glasses off.
Yeah.
Get ready. Your brain's
Yeah.
gonna explode.
I get that so often. I mean, people that when they get a little time in, they're like, and genuine, I believe this with all my heart. Look, and I don't mean I'm the furthest thing from tough love, but if anyone's listening to and they're relating and they got a big bad habit and they got some of these maladies that we've discussed, your brain is not, I'll say this in the most emphatic and empathetic way I can, is your brain is not capable of making decisions for you currently. You have, I mean, calling diabetes or Alzheimer's diabetes 3 is very real. My mother died of sugar addiction. She did not die of Alzheimer's. She died of sugar addiction. And your brain is not, capable of making a decision for your health regarding this product. You have got to force the abstinence on yourself for a period to see, to test. Like, like there's a saying in recovery, is like, you stop hitting yourself in the head with a hammer because you like how it feels when you stop, or you're hitting you're hitting yourself in the head with a hammer because you like the feeling when it stops, so that's basically what we're into here. I mean, we're talking about something where none of it's your fault. There's an entire industry out there. It's been an evolutionary process of 300 years to get us here. And I don't believe we can get out of stuff till we figure out how we got in it, both personally and societally. And so you study the history of it, and you study why and how, and why high fructose corn syrup has got in the diet, why processed food is not really food. It's just a chemical experiment. It's literally an experiment, a societal experiment that failed. And the short version is, and after World War II, the K-ration manufacturers for the troops had to have a business to go into, and they went into the business of processing, making food more shelf stable. And before that, before the 50s, everyone was thin. Obesity was a very rare thing, very rare. And so, yeah, I mean, I hate to relieve people and say it's not your fault you got here, because there is some responsibility, but in general, it's not their fault, but it is their responsibility to come out of it,
To me, if there were a single phrase that's the most powerful phrase for people to get their head around the path of their personal liberation, it's that even though it's not my fault, it's still in my accountability column.
Yeah, I like that. That's exactly right. It's their responsibility to, once aware. And that's one of the things I kind of snidely or secretly is that we screw up people's sugar use. We mess it up bad. If they even commit. And one of the things we call them retreads, but one of the things that we try to create is a loving and accepting community that people will come back to, right? Because everybody's path is different. We have people that have been around years, 2 and 3 and 4 years, and then all of a sudden they got 60 days and 90, you know, it took them 4 years to get 90 days, but they felt comfortable coming back, and they felt that they learned enough in the whatever periods of time they had in the early days when they first tried it. And so it's that kind of long-term thinking that, you know, I think has made us a little bit of success. But it takes, people ask, Mike, what's your business model? I said, I sort for people that are ready. If they're not ready, I can't do anything for them. I mean, they've got to be ready. And sometimes being ready takes, one of my mentors and friends in this, she says, you don't relapse on sugar for the first 6 months because you aren't really capable. It's all a process of back and forth for 6 months till you kind of understand it all. So yeah, it's a long-term thing, and people need to be committed to their health to get it.
I'll mention a couple of books that have been inspiring to me, because the thought leaders you mentioned in the blog transcription version of this, those will be hyperlinked. So the people that want to really drill down on today's content, they'll go to the blog and click on the hyperlinks. And I found Mark Hyman's blood sugar solution to be very illuminating about the physiology of sugar. And I found, I think Mark Hyman's recent book, Food Fix, takes a really hard look at how the food industry has similarities to the tobacco industry, et cetera, with you know, scientists that create things that
I'll add one to that. This one here is the about food scientist Michael Long, fat, sugar, salt, sugar, and fat.
Yeah,
basically how you, same as that, like how they like manipulate it, you know, manipulate the food.
Yeah, and I like this idea that there's a personal courage and a personal payoff then as we become clear-eyed through this process of freeing ourselves, and then you know, supporting others who want to be free. The front end's got this sort of intimidation factor, like, oh, gee shucks, do I have to? And the flip side has this expansiveness and this sense of clarity. And as our brains clear up, the thing I've gotten to witness over and over again that's so compelling to me and just keeps me coming back for more, I feel like I love the work I get to do as a functional medicine doctor so much. It doesn't feel like work a lot of the time, because it feels like I get to see these folks come back and say, oh my gosh, it's easier to pay my bills. It's easier to be a breadwinner. It's easier to be patient with my kid. I sleep better. I'm running again. I love the foods in my pantry. I feel like somebody in France who allocates more of my personal budget to food because I love healthy food. I love sleeping now. It's a whole new world.
I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head for, you know, my reward factor in that seeing that light bulb go on. And one of the things that I think people who are what I call seekers, if you will, people, they don't want to die with their music inside them. People that have big goals and things, they say my folks say the same exact thing. They have more energy. They have more clarity of thought. They're less fragmented. They can focus better. And we have a saying around here, they come for the vanity, stay for the sanity, right? Basically, people think they want to lose weight. They think they want to, you know, and they do, and they will, but really it's that the rewards are in the brain clarity that I mentioned before that move their life forward, like you're describing. And that is, you know, when someone's got a year or two, they say, how could I have possibly thought that, you know, this ingestation, you know, X amount of times daily was good for me? I mean, they can't really even make their brain wrap around their previous life. And so it's an exciting time for that, for me, and for when I get those emails and whatever. And so, yeah, you're 100% right.
What a pleasure talking to you today. Are there any key concepts we didn't explore together that it's really important for you to share with people who heard this and hear this?
Yeah, I always like to end with, it's funny because we almost did end with it in that the people that get success are a little bit of rebel, they're a little bit of pioneer. You can trace them back scholastically, athletically, a job, career, parenting. They were, a mini star in their mini world in that way. And one of the things they weren't afraid to do is to join another tribe, first person to go to college, first person to play pro sport, whatever, something that
Mm-hmm.
they did for best mechanic in the city, whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is, they were good at it. And in order to be good at it, they had to think for themselves and step out on the research they've done and their own intuition. And so that's kind of the definition of the early adopter or the pioneer. And that's what's needed right now for folk, for
Mm.
both for the mission or for the, for the growth of this information to get out, and the people that are succeeding, because the next wave, even like in tech, the next wave, it's going to be self-evident, right? But
Mm-hmm.
for now, we get we do get a lot of pioneers that are
Mm-hmm.
interesting as hell people, man, really interesting as hell people. So if this resonates with you, if you're that person, then we'd love to meet you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, no,
This
I
has been
enjoyed it.
great.
Yeah, I want to tell you that this was the most high level. There's only two or three that were as high level understanding of some of the constructs that I try to express. I get a lot of people that are, what's the food plan, and what's kind of exercise. That's all they're interested in, and
Mm.
this allowed me to flesh it out more, and I think it's important. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it makes me glad that I had the Institute for Functional Medicine training, which is really intensive about the physiology. And so
Yeah.
a lot of us feel like when we're taking the Institute for Functional Medicine classes,
Hmm.
like it's a return to med school. And
Okay.
there's a lecturer up there, and they're on the 13th slide about what some receptor does, or some physiologic cascade, or genetic expression, or an inflammatory cytokine, and you feel like, okay, here we go again, right?
Right.
But the power of it, that they've made a decision at IFM that they're going to be intellectually rigorous down to the last detail, then
Mm,
parallels med school and residency, because I think that most of us trained this way use about 3% of what we learn day to day. But
wow.
at some point we learned the other 97%. It's there. It's
Mm,
there in the wiring of like the bigger picture.
hmm.
And so I think as things have come into focus for me, I see today's discussion as connecting the dots for our listeners. Like we're accelerating their progress, as it
Mm,
were, by distilling the concepts.
right.
And
Exactly.
so they get to be more of that second wave you were describing, where they can kind of jump on and hit the wave a little more quickly and confidently, and not have to work quite as hard at it as you and I did, perhaps.
That
So
that would bring me great joy.
yeah,
That's kind of my goal. That whenever that tipping point is, I'm scared to death the tipping point will happen earlier, and I won't be ready for the flood, because I think the flood's going to be gigantic. Like
yeah,
I'll give you an example real quick. Is last year A Rod and J Lo did a 10-day carb thing,
yeah,
and the internet exploded.
uh-huh,
Exploded. Now it
yeah,
died down, and they went back to carbs, not a lot, but and so pretty soon, it keeps happening. Rebel Wilson is another famous actress. Same thing happened this year. It's
mm-hmm,
going to keep happening. And just like
mm-hmm,
the recovering alcoholic and drug using stars, and this will be more accepting in society. Says, like, when Robert Downey Jr. gets sober, well, he's freaking Robert Downey Jr. His father was a famous guy. It's like they think of him as living in a bubble. But with the food and the sugar and stuff, that will relate much more to people. And I think that
mm-hmm.
that tipping point is going to be an interesting place. I'm
Oh yeah,
excited for it. Excited for it.
oh yeah. Well, this has been just this has just felt great, and I'm so happy for our audience that they're gonna get to hear our conversation. And thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you for having me, and keep up the great work.
Likewise. Seaworthy exists for people to overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. Please consider subscribing, giving us a 5-star review if we've earned it, and going to our website podcast tab for any questions or comments you'd like to share with us. Thanks.